Well, good morning. Greetings in Christ. So a bit of an update on Baltimore, our life in Baltimore. We do have something that you'd be welcome to come to, a Christmas concert on Friday the 13th at 5 o'clock. So that's our annual school Christmas concert. We are working on a building project. May I've mentioned this before, but an addition on our school that's going to add about 4 classrooms, and it's going to cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. But we actually may be getting into that this summer if everything goes really well. So we'll be looking to raise funds for that before it starts, actually. Our children are doing well in school. Angelo is in 1st grade, Elijah is in 8th grade, and the rest are in between. So Elijah being in 8th grade means that he's going to be homeschooling next year since we don't have a high school there, which not exactly something that his parents are looking forward to, especially his mother, shall we say. And it's something that needs a lot of thought and planning yet from his father, so I need to really try to get into what we're going to do for that yet, because I'm not sure. We feel like we live in a pretty safe neighborhood there in Hamden. Not much happens on our quiet street, but lately that has been different at our house. We've had a couple of kind of crazy, scary incidents. As you may have heard, our pottery, we sell pottery in this little cabinet out on the curb, and it's an honor system. So for 2 years, almost nothing has gotten stolen from that until just like 2 months ago, everything got stolen all at one time. And we didn't know what happened to it until maybe 2 weeks ago. It all came back. Somebody came up the street and said, hey, one of our neighbors said they think they found the pottery, and it was in some trash bags in a little alley. It is wrapped up with newspapers, and like somebody had intended to give it for gifts. Like one of the pieces said "for Mom" on it. So maybe a homeless person. I don't know. But we got it back. Washed it off and put it back out there. But since then, we've had some other things that have happened as well that are even a little more concerning to us. Elijah was opening the back of the van the other morning. I had unlocked the van just like an hour previously and left it unlocked, which was a mistake. He went out to the van and unlocked it with the keys, and it made that beeping noise. And as soon as he did that, the front door opened and somebody got out. And he was standing back there just wondering what in the world was going on. And this person apologized and left. Apparently either was getting out of the cold or was probably just riffling through looking for spare change, which happens. That's happened to us before, but we never ran into the person in the act. Another thing that happened was another one of my son's bike got stolen, and we just recently put a security camera out front since the pottery got stolen. And so we were able to see who stole it, and as a person we recognized. And I'll have a little more of that story later. And then finally, just yesterday, when we got, on Thursday evening, when we got back from Thanksgiving. We were gone for Thanksgiving. We came back Thursday evening, and a bunch of stuff had been going through in our house, we could tell, and it was very unsettling. And I want to tell you a little bit more about that later in the middle of the message, hopefully, if I have time. Okay, for the message today, turn to 2 Kings 5. 2 Kings 5, 1 through 14. The story of Naaman. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, a little girl. And she waited on or served Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. And it was so, when Elisha the man of God had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and went away and said, Behold, I thought, he will surely come out to me and stand and call in the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldn't thou have done it? How much rather then, when he saith to thee, Wash and be clean? Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So the message today is about authority. The title is Authority Under God. And what's happening with authority in this passage is this little girl who was his servant was, first of all, exercising her power to help. And so in some way, I think we could say she was exercising her responsibility or her authority by giving the king a suggestion. She could have kept that to herself, but she said, I'm going to do what I can to help my master. And she gave a suggestion that this captain go to her land and get healed. And then when this captain Naaman came to Elisha, he was presented with some rudeness, I would say. He got there, and Elisha didn't even come out to see him. He wasn't being a very caring prophet. And he told him to do an unpleasant thing. And this man went off in a rage, in a huff. He was offended. This prophet, this representative of God, did not even come out to see me when I came. He just sent somebody out to give me a message. And he could have come out. He could have done his ceremonial prophet things, waved his hand over it. And that's what I was picturing. That's what he should have done. That's how he should have treated me. He did not do that. I'm angry. And in thinking about relating to authority, I think sometimes we have our requirements for how people in authority should treat us, how our leaders should care for us. They should talk to me like this. This is how I want to be treated. And when they don't do that, we're offended. And we maybe don't want to accept what they have to say. And this person, Elisha, did have something to say, and he was an authority. He was the spokesman of God. And he did know what to tell Naaman. And Naaman, when he finally listened to and submitted to that authority and yielded to it and did what was specified, he was healed. And that's the purpose of authority, is to bring about goodness into people's lives. So what is authority? Well, authority is the power to influence or command. And it means that you have responsibility and you have the mandate to carry that responsibility out. And the purpose of authority is to bring about good, to bring about blessedness, and to bring about flourishing in your domain of authority. That is the purpose of authority. So the burden of this message is that we would grow more to appreciate the blessing of authority, that we'd grow also in our willingness to exercise our own God-given authority, and that we'd grow in a desire to interact well with imperfect authorities. So let's look a bit at the blessing of authority. Turn to John 10. John 10, this is about Jesus being the good shepherd. John 10, verses 1 through 11. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter it, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out, and find pasture. The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. So Jesus here describes himself as the good shepherd. And that's an allusion to many references in the Old Testament about God being our shepherd. I think about Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And it's a picture of how God relates to his people, and we are the sheep. But the picture of Christ as the shepherd here is a picture of a good, of a loving, of an involved authority. The shepherd had authority over the sheep, deciding where they go, when it's time to come in from the field, when it's time to eat. The shepherd feeds them, cares for them, corrects them. He's the shepherd. He calls the shots. He has authority. His authority is several things. Number one, it's protective. In verse 3, he leads them out. He leads them out. In verse 4, he goes before them. And when he goes before them, he's in front of them. So any predator would have to deal with him first. He's protecting them. He's loving them in verse 3. He is actually calling them by name. Every sheep has a name, not just a number, but a name, and he knows it. And he's not just taking care of this mass of worthless sheep, but he knows each sheep by name. He's protective, he's loving, and he's sacrificial. Verse 11, he says, I'm going to lay my life down for these sheep. You know, that is a shocking statement for a shepherd to make, considering that sheep, maybe one sheep isn't that terribly valuable. Definitely not worth more than the life of the shepherd. So this would have been very unexpected for a shepherd to be willing to lay his life down for a sheep. But that's what Jesus said he would do, and that's what he did. Remember, the purpose of authority is for the good, the blessedness, and the flourishing of those that are under authority. And that's what Jesus is doing here. He says in verse 9, I am the door. If you enter in, you will be saved. You will go in and out and find pasture. And what are we saved from? We're saved from the wrath of God, which each of us deserves. Instead of experiencing that, Jesus gave his life to us who have gone astray, to us who have turned everyone to his own way, and he brings us good as our authority who is willing to lay his life down for us. He brings us blessedness. He brings us the highest degree of flourishing that we could imagine. This sheep in verse 9, where it's going in and out, finding pasture. I just have this picture of this sheep in this perfect little sheep world with lots of green grass, just going in and out, just having a great sheep life. And that is the kind of life that God wants to give us. The sheep does not have to worry about predators, does not have to worry about going hungry, does not have to worry about taking care of his life because the shepherd is doing that. I like to look, so that is the purpose of good authority, captured here in a picture of a shepherd, and how they protect, they care for, they love, they sacrifice for those under them. What about our own authority that God has given us? Because one of my hopes is that we can grow in our own acceptance of authority that God has given to us. So what would you say is one of the biggest differences between humans and animals? Well, I think it's starts out pretty early on there, Genesis 1:26, where it says that God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." My children like to talk about creepy things sometimes. They use that word creepy, which I believe is one of the most overused adjectives of the last 5 years. But here's some creepy things that we are to have dominion over. And so this is the difference between humans and animals is that we are given dominion over all the rest of creation, including the animals, and they have not. We've been given dominion. Who gave us dominion? Well, God gave us dominion, and what did he give us dominion over? Over everything? No, he gave us a dominion over a limited part of his creation, and he lists it out here. He lists the animals basically, and the over all the earth. In Psalm 8 it says that God made us a little lower than the angels. He crowned us with glory and honor, and he put all things under our feet. He said, I should actually look at that to get that exact wording. But basically, God did put a lot of basically creation under our dominion, not everything else. But God gave us authority over creation, and that's an important principle of authority, is that for all authority, except of course God's own authority, all other authority comes from God. All legitimate authority derives its source in God. It's because God gave that authority. He delegated authority, and that means something. It means a lot. So God has delegated much, I would say, of his authority to us. He trusts us with a lot. Delegation means we now have at least these three things. We have responsibility, autonomy, and accountability. Responsibility meaning that there are things that are now our job. It is our job to look after these things. Nobody else's. We also have autonomy, meaning we are able to decide how to accomplish the jobs that are given to us. Of course, within the parameters. So somebody that has autonomy is able to make decisions for themselves, but usually within certain parameters. And then we have accountability. So even though we can decide a lot about how this job is to be done, we are accountable to God. If we fail, it's on us. That's the tough part about being a leader, and that's why many people shy away from being an authority, is because of that accountability and that potential of failure and that acceptance of responsibility that you must do if you are the person who has that job. People shy away from this, but I would say we can't avoid being an authority. If we are a human being, we must accept that we are to be in authority. And that starts when we're a child, and it grows. And if we try to avoid that, we're avoiding part of God's plan for us. So how does that start? It starts at a pretty young age. Maybe a newborn doesn't really have a lot of authority and exercises very little authority over anything, except they end up being the boss of the house somehow. But maybe they're not actually trying, because they can't control themselves. And so they're just screaming about everything. But about 2 years old, we expect a child to begin exercising authority over something very basic, and that is over their potty needs. And if they don't exercise authority over their body in that way, by the time they're 3, let's say, then we think something is wrong here. So potty training is the first exercise of responsibility and authority. And later, as we keep growing, we continue to exercise godly authority over our bodies in other ways, like brushing, flossing our teeth, being careful with what we eat, exercising. We attempt to bring our bodies under subjection, like Paul said. It's at the very most basic level, every human needs to exercise authority over their body. We expect our children to exercise authority over their possessions. We expect them to take care of their things. If we give them a bike, we expect them to take care of it, to not leave it out in the rain, for instance. We expect them to take good care of other things that they have. We expect them to save their money, to exercise their authority over their money, and occasionally maybe decide to spend it, but we train them to make good choices, and we want to see them growing in their exercise of authority there. One of my young children decided that keeping their small collection of dollars and quarters in their room was simply too great a responsibility, because as they would look at this money, sometimes it would get lost, and it was just too much. So this child delegated that responsibility to the bank, which in this case was Allison and I's bedroom. And so it's sitting there in an envelope in our bedroom. I would say that is a wise use of authority by the child, who says, I want to delegate this to somebody else who can take better care of it than I can. And that was that child's decision. Siblings. Many times, children are delegated some authority over their siblings for a temporary period, while mom and dad go on a date, for instance. And it shows clearly the nature of authority. It always has its source higher up. Mom said we cannot go pig out on this box of ice cream, so we better not do that. Dad said we cannot bike any further than this. We need to stay off the street. No, we can't do this, we can't do that. And that older child, or whoever has been given that authority, is exercising their authority on the basis of authority that has been given to them from above. Children exercise authority when they do their chores, when they care for animals, for instance, and they are exercising their authority for the flourishing and the goodness of the animals under their care. And when we care for animals, I like to think about a couple things here. The verse in Proverbs says, "The righteous man regards the life of his beast." And this is just a part of that dominion thing that God gave us. God told us to have dominion. That means responsible care. And so we are looking out for all of creation as stewards of it. And that means we're never killing or causing pain to animals in fun. And it really pains me to hear people talking about, like, say, dismembering an insect for fun. We should never enjoy causing or seeing suffering. This is a perversion of what God intended. Instead, we care for animals because they're part of God's good creation. They're given to us for our good. Hunting season, I believe, is coming up. Maybe it's already almost past. I can't quite remember when the season runs down here anymore. But we shoot game with a sense of reverence for life and with a sense of gratitude, with a sense of providing for and taking care of people who are going to enjoy that food. Children, you take authority when you exercise authority over your learning. You are determined to learn that Bible memory perfectly. And you're doing what it takes to make the most of the opportunity to learn that you've been given, because there's an awful lot you can squander there if you don't take authority over that situation and say, I'm going to make the most of this. And as you take responsibility and exercise good authority over that part of your life, you're going to become a person who can be trusted with more and more later. So everyone has things under their control and care in their circle of influence. I remember one of my favorite books for a very long time has been Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which has been around for years and years. But he talks in that book about your circle of influence and how really the only thing you need to worry about is the things that are in your circle of influence, things that you have direct interaction with. There's a lot of things outside of that you have no influence over. Don't worry about those things. But if you do care about the things that are inside your domain of responsibility, and you do well with those things, inevitably it's going to grow. People are going to trust you with more and more things. People who can't control even the very basic things about their life and about things around them will never see their responsibilities growing. My wife, for instance, has a lot of authority. She has the domain of the house is kind of hers. She makes many or most of the rules around the house about how things are to be done in the house, and how the children are to interact with that, with the house and with their chores and so on. That's her domain. I try to help her with it, but I also try to acknowledge that this is yours. And I kind of want to fit in and help you where I can. I don't want to try to take her authority away or override it because I trust her with that responsibility. Every human exercises authority. It's part of being created under God. We should not take authority that is not ours. In our family, this is called being the papa. You are not the papa. That is a common refrain of our children. Or you are not the mama. As they, kind of test the limits of their own authority with each other, and they are reminded that, no, indeed, this is not your authority. And when we see people taking authority inappropriately, we react to that. It should not be. It's not their thing. But let's not shy away from taking authority when it's given to us. In my view, this is a worse problem than people taking authority that's not theirs. When people shy away from taking authority that they should take. We need people who are willing to take on leadership roles. And the Bible clearly says, he who desires the office of bishop desires a good thing. Leadership is a needed service. It's needed to protect, to serve, to care for people. It is difficult. It involves a lot of accountability. It often involves being criticized. And we may tell ourselves, I'm a servant. Just let me serve. Let me just serve in my little servant place down here where the pressure is less. And I'll just stay out of that leadership stuff. And we maybe even fool ourselves that we're being humble. And we're just trying to avoid that. But what we're missing there, I think, is that being unwilling to lead where it's needed is simply being unwilling to serve. What a huge blessing when people are called to lead and they step up to it, or they see a place where leadership is needed and they step into that and they provide the leadership that is needed. That is just incredible and wonderful when people do that. Let's not shy away from God-given authority. And now, flourishing under authority. Romans 13:1. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. So this is saying, this is a passage that applies mostly to government authority, but here in the first verse it says, kind of makes this broad statement, there's no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God. Simply saying that all authority goes back to God. And it's ordained of God. And so this would include, of course, the church. It would include the family. It would include the state, as this passage is talking about. We're not going to read the rest of this necessarily this morning, but I just wanted to point that out and talk now about issues with authority. So how do we flourish under authority when we have authorities who have issues? Meaning imperfect authorities, people that do things they shouldn't do. No authority does not have issues. All people are human, all make mistakes, sometimes little, sometimes big. And I think we know that, but it is hard to trust people when we see them making mistakes, when we lose confidence in them as people. And that is difficult. But what I'd like to call us to here as we go through is that we cannot expect flawless leaders. And in fact, if they are like that, and we think they are, that's probably the worst problem. And I'll get to that here. But we have authorities that make mistakes, and we also have serious abuse of authority that does happen. I read about a boss who loved to be in charge, apparently, and he timed people who went to the bathroom, and anything over 5 minutes was subtracted from vacation time. That, I would say, is an abuse of authority. You know, some people, they crave power, and they like the idea of being the boss, of being in charge, of having people do what they say. And I think this is actually fairly unusual. And for the rest of us who don't want to take leadership, I think we fear this a lot. We fear that we're going to be perceived as just being one of these bossy people. But I really don't think that this actually happens in leadership all that much. And I would say that leaders, in my experience, and I definitely open to your perspectives on this, but in my experience, leaders are accused of craving power a lot more often than is actually the case. And I think they're accused of it unfairly simply because people don't appreciate what they're being asked to do. So an easy reaction to that is to just accuse a leader of being power hungry. But it does happen. There's also abuse of children and vulnerable people, and this is very, very sad. The Catholic Church has gone through a lot of scandals lately, and especially in Maryland there, we hear about it a lot because Catholicism was very, very big there in Baltimore. And they are just reeling from decades of scandal and abuse. And of course, they are very sorry. They're trying to make things right, but they've lost a tremendous number of people coming to their churches, and they're having to close about 2/3 or more of their churches in Baltimore are closing. It's tragic. The Boy Scouts of America went through a recent sexual abuse scandal, and many other places as well. So there's abuse of authority, takes many forms. There is abuse of, kind of coming down closer. We could have parents abusing their authority, parents berating their children, disciplining in abusive and angry ways, neglecting children. I just read about a girl in Baltimore who died from starvation. Just literally 5-year-old girl was not fed, and just horrible. In church, you can have ministers abusing their authority, berating people, accusing people in non-loving ways. And I recently heard a story that broke my heart about something like this. In Baltimore, we have the Baltimore Police Department, and they were under a lot of scrutiny toward the end of 2019 and 2020, even before that. But the Justice Department actually held them to account and put them under a consent decree, meaning that they have to answer to the Justice Department on how they conduct themselves. And one of the things they were doing, they were targeting black people in a hugely disproportionate way, and doing a lot of arresting of blacks unnecessarily. And it was very clear. I mean, I know that there's debate about these things on a national level, and sometimes you really wonder what the truth is, like what actually did happen there. Is this just some liberal bias that is accusing the police unfairly? Well, I don't think it was in this case. I really think their criticism was justly deserved, and that they had a reputation in Baltimore among people that I know in Baltimore just being very untrustworthy. You just would not trust the police, and they're basically, they were called crooks, just like, on the level of everybody else. So that's a very disconcerting thing when you have people in authority that are not trustworthy. They planted guns. They were trying to get rid of illegal guns. So this task force, gun trace task force, actually planted guns on people to get them in trouble unfairly, so they could, look better with their task force. Things like that. Well, I wonder. I've wondered, how things are going with them. We've had since moving there quite a few different interactions with the police. And I'd say most of them have been actually very positive, including one the other day. So what happened the other day after Thanksgiving for us is we got home after Thanksgiving and found in our bedroom stuff had been pulled off of the shelf where we keep our totes with different things in them, including a little safe where we keep our documents like birth certificates and passports and social security numbers and stuff is in this safe with a key. The safe has a key in it. Basically, it's a fireproof safe, so I just leave the key in it. Because, of course, it would be worse if somebody would steal the whole safe. So, anyway, the safe was open. Everything was, there was a lot of stuff across the bed. And we got home, we're like, did our children do this? And Allison started calling our children who had gone home with my parents, and no, they hadn't done it, and it just didn't make sense that anybody would have pulled that stuff out and kind of shuffled it around like that. So we started getting a little bit worried, and we looked at our security camera footage and found some very interesting pictures and videos of people. And what apparently happened was around 10 o'clock, no, it was around 11:15 on Thanksgiving morning, this person came knocking at our door, and it was this group of 4 ladies. So this first lady came and knocked at our door for about 3 minutes. She would knock on the door, ring the doorbell, and this went on for about 3 minutes until she was, I think, quite positive that nobody was home. And then another 2 ladies came up, and they appeared to be dressed like gypsies. So very, very interesting to be targeted by gypsies. I didn't know that they existed around here, but apparently they do. And so these ladies went around the side of our house, out of sight of the camera, but apparently they went to the back of the house, and there was an open window because our kiln was on at the time. It's being vented, and so the window was pushed open. So they came in, and apparently, and went looking for things. And they were in there for about 10 minutes, according to the camera. And then they came back out. And all this while, there was another person walking back and forth on the sidewalk, kind of keeping an eye on everything. And then there was some conferring with that person, and then away they went. So very, let's say, professional operation. But we do not know what they were after, because they looked right up in the bedroom. There was cash laying in 2 different places, including my son's bank with us. It was right there in front of their noses, and they did not get it. I don't know if they went and took pictures of all our identity documents and are going to try to do some identity theft, or what it is. It's kind of unsettling, but thankfully they didn't take anything that we know of. So we called the police the next morning. It was a little late that evening, and we were going to try to get some sleep. We didn't really get much of any sleep for some reason. The next morning, called the police, and an officer came out almost right away. Very nice man, Mr. Cordala. He took an interest in our family. He asked us what we did for Thanksgiving. He went up to our bedroom. He looked at it, and he looked at that sign. He said, "You know what? We have a sign behind our bed that says a threefold cord is not easily broken." He looked at that sign. He said, "My wife and I have a sign like that." And I was like, this guy must be a Christian, which is very unusual in Baltimore at all to even find a Christian, much less in the police department. So that was very reassuring. And then we also told him about the bike that had been stolen. And he was interested in getting the bike back. He recognized the person as well that stole it. He said, "I know that person. His name is Tony. He lives in this encampment down across the river." and he thinks he can probably get that bike back. And so he was going to work on that for us. It was very heartening to deal with somebody who you could tell they cared. And, when dealing with a good authority, you get a sense of rest. This person is going to take care of me. And they have the ability and the authorization to do it. I'm talking to the right person. And I very much got that sense there. But there is a tendency that we can have then is to make heroes out of our leaders or authorities. We can heroize them. And that is, I think, a real problem. I can tell you stories of how I have done that. I'm going to skip over that. But when we turn leaders into heroes and they become the ultimate to us, we put our hope in them. They almost take the place of God. And they will almost always let us down. And when they do that, we're worse off than before. Do not put your hope in man, in people, in a leader of any kind. They will always let you down. They were never meant to be put in that place. And when we do that, we reveal our need for security, and perhaps we reveal our lack of security in God. And when we make a leader a hero, that leader may be tempted to believe the wonderful things that are being said about them. And that's not good for the leader. It sets everyone up for a great fall. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Many, many leaders have gone through a Humpty Dumpty experience. It is not fun. I think they can be set up by their followers for something like that. I guess everybody can share the blame on these things, but followers and leaders can both be complicit. Principles of being under authority. Well, let's take a look at the scriptures again in 1 Peter. There's a number of little places here we'll jump in. First of all, 1 Peter 1, 14 and 15. As obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts in your ignorance. But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation. So this is just pointing out the nature of us as Christians is obedient children. And first of all, we're obedient to God. That's our first obedience. Chapter 2, verses 13 and 14. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. For so is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. So we are obedient to legal authorities for the Lord's sake. This is our obedience to God. It is coming through to our obedience to these people. Verse 18, servants or slaves, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward, even to the bad masters. You are to be obedient to them, slaves. Wives in chapter 3, verse 1. Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. In verse 6, it says, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. Sarah, even with all of Abraham's failings as a husband, with the way he treated her, which was not very good, denying that she was his wife when he went traveling, and things that just make us shiver, he was still called Lord by Sarah. Verse 7 tells how the husband should carry this authority. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. This is a picture of a good authority that is truly looking out for the well-being, the flourishing, the good of those under his authority. 5, 1 through 3, talking about church authority. And again, how the authority should be held. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples and samples to the flock. So again, this shows the reluctance with which many people take up authority. It's always been like this, I guess. Verse 2, don't take it because you have to, because of constraint, but do it willingly. And don't be bossy. Verse 3, don't be lording your authority. And then verse 4 shows the reward, that when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. And that shows the delegated nature of this authority. It's authority that's given by God, and he is looking, he's going to pay attention to how you're doing, and he's going to reward you. Verse 5, likewise ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. There is submission that is called for. There is submission that is called for to church leaders. Hebrews 13:17, obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy, and not with grief. So that's the first principle, is we submit gladly, as unto the Lord. And second principle, we obey God first and evaluate all authority on the basis of God's word. So in Acts, Peter and John were out healing people, and they were told by the Sanhedrin not to do that, and they came back and they kept doing it, and they asked, why are you doing this after we told you not to? And they said, we ought to obey God rather than men. And this is an important principle when it comes to our relation to authority. There are times when authorities are wrong. What does a wife do when her husband wants her to do something morally wrong? What do church members do when church leaders want them to do something that is wrong? Being under authority, even though we would love to just sit back and relax and feel cared for and shut our brain off, we are not allowed to do that. Being under authority does not give us the option of turning our mind and our conscience off. We want not to have to think too hard. We want people to tell us what to do. And that's, I suppose, it's not all bad. but we are still accountable to God personally. And there are perils of sheep-like submission. And that's point number 3. We understand the perils of sheep-like submission. Now, we are called sheep, and he is called our shepherd. But we don't have to emulate sheep in every single way. And one of those is just unthinking obedience, like complete unthinking following. Sheep are great followers. They'll follow each other right off the cliff. This happens in Germany under Hitler. Those men who were later tried in the Nuremberg trials for their crimes against humanity were just following orders. That's what they were doing. They were following orders. They were being obedient to their authority. And they were held accountable for that. You've heard the saying, they drank the Kool-Aid. And Kool-Aid was what the followers of Jim Jones drank in 1979 in a South American country. I think it was Colombia or Venezuela. Where Jim Jones took this group of people down there. He was a cult leader. He had their complete loyalty and obedience. And he asked his followers to drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. And they all did it together, and they all died. And so now when you say somebody has drank the Kool-Aid, we're talking about an organization where people are following a leader without thinking for themselves. They're all thinking the same way, kind of in a brainwashed sort of way. You don't want to be accused of drinking the Kool-Aid. That's sheep-like submission. Children who are taught to submit and nothing else are at risk of being abused. Children whose only teaching and only mantra is submit, that is a problem. And to children, I want to say, don't let anyone, including a parent, touch you in inappropriate places. Don't listen to strangers. If someone, even someone in authority, tells you to do something wrong, don't do it. Get help from another adult. That's the perils of sheep-like submission. Point number 4. When Scripture has been violated, we appeal respectfully and courageously. We do not have the option of quietly doing something different because we disagree. So, thinking about where we come here, we don't want to be sheep-like in our submission. We want to evaluate things against the Scriptures. But then what happens when we disagree? When someone tells us to do something that we disagree with? Do we just quietly go and do something different because we disagree with them? I say no. You don't do that. If you do that, something breaks in the relationship that you don't want broken. The integrity of the relationship is broken because we are professing to be under that authority, and we're holding that up in a hypocritical way as I'm under this authority, but I'm just doing my own thing because they told me something that was wrong. No, instead of doing that, we appeal. We appeal first to the person themselves. 1 Timothy 5:1 says, "Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father," giving the impression of entreating somebody if something needs to be brought up. There's the example of Paul in appealing to Caesar, he went to a higher authority in Acts there because he did not appreciate the sentence that was being handed to him. And he thought he'd get better results with a higher authority. And so he appealed. And I believe that's legitimate. We are allowed to appeal, both to the authority, the initial authority, and if that doesn't work, to the authority beyond that authority, the authority who is above them. That's why these structures are in place. And we are allowed to use those. But that must be done respectfully. And that must be done always. It's going to take courage. And it's often easier not to appeal, just to kind of let things go and just relationships, talk about them to other people, make relationships worse, and kind of make the situation worse by not actually respectfully appealing. And finally, the fifth thing I have here is bless, encourage, and pray for those who are in authority. Recognizing that many people are in some kind of authority, including your child, who you've given the responsibility of taking care of the chickens. So you can bless, encourage, and pray for them. You can encourage the teachers at school who have a lot of responsibility and accountability. And the teachers at church. We just saw a new batch of teachers here today. Blessings to you in your work teaching Sunday school. It's a serious responsibility. Bless and encourage moms and your wife if you're a husband. She's got a lot of authority and responsibility in her home. Bless the dads or your husband or your father, people who are responsible for their families. Or the government inspectors that you interact with, whether they're health inspectors or building inspectors, they are responsible for a certain domain, and often we don't appreciate the level of responsibility that they have. Your pastors, people in authority responsible for the flock. It's no light matter to be in dominion, to be given dominion. So let's lift these people to God, let's respect, let's encourage. So the burden of this message was to grow more in appreciation for the blessing of authority, how it comes from God. It's a good thing. That we grow in our willingness to exercise the authority God may give to us, and that we would grow in interacting well with authorities who are not perfect. Thank you, and let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Lord, we're grateful to you to be under your good authority that is just goodness, and you're watching out for us, you're caring for us like a shepherd, you're giving your life for us. You have done that, and we are grateful for the goodness that you bring about because of your authority. And we pray, Lord, that you would give us a better understanding of authority and our roles in it, and help us to carry the authority you've given us, to respect and honor the authorities that we interact with that are over us. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.